The chandeliers sparkled like distant constellations above the ballroom floor, casting a soft, golden hue on the polished marble tiles. It was the kind of night where everyone played a role, the flawless actor, the charming executive, the unbothered icon. But beneath the designer gowns and tailored tuxedos, egos simmered and intentions sharpened like knives. Inside the iconic Beverly Heights Grand Hotel, March 2019 felt like any other award season, until at DIDN single quotes Sandra. Bullock walked in with effortless grace. A black silk gown flowed with her every step, her presence warm and magnetic without trying. At 54, she was not just a movie star, she was a legend with nothing left to prove. Her eyes still carrying the spark of the woman who once turned. Heads and speed now held something deeper, wisdom, resilience, peace. Around her gathered a cluster of emerging filmmakers, wide-eyed, nervous, eager. And Sandra, in that rare way only a few can manage, gave them her full attention. She listened. She laughed. She lifted. Because that's who she was, a giver in a town full of takers. Across the room, Keanu Reeves entered quietly. He didn't need a spotlight. The silence often followed him in a way applause never could. Wearing a black blazer over a soft gray tee, jeans that didn't care about the dress code, and a neatly groomed beard that had become his signature, Keanu's energy was stillness. At 54, he was Hollywood's contradiction, a superstar who walked like a monk among wolves. No one noticed Marcus Langston yet, but Marcus had noticed everyone, silver-haired, sharp-suited, and chillingly composed at 52. Marcus wasn't just a studio executive. He was the kind of man whose emails could end careers. He didn't make films, he manufactured fear. To him, power wasn't something to earn, it was something to wield like a whip. And tonight, he had an itch to remind everyone who still ran Hollywood. He nursed a glass of neat scotch in one hand, eyes fixed on Sandra like a hawk circling high. He didn't like what she represented: grace, longevity, independence. She was still admired, still powerful, and worst of all, she didn't need him. That made her dangerous. As the ceremony began, speeches rolled out like wallpaper, rehearsed, polite, and utterly forgettable. But beneath the polished formalities, a current buzzed. Something was off. A storm was building, not of weather, but of reckoning. In Keanu. He noticed it too. He watched Sandra laugh with those young filmmakers, saw how they hung on every word, saw how the cameras weren't pointed at her, but the impact was undeniable. She wasn't trending tonight, she was teaching. That's when Marcus made his move. He crossed the room like a man marching toward a duel he thought he'd already won. Every step of his leather shoes echoed with arrogant certainty. Cell phones captured smiles, drinks, and red carpet gossip, but some phones were about to record something else entirely. Sandra, Marcus said with that full cordial voice laced in venom. Still holding court, are we? The warmth in the group around her fizzled. Conversations halted. The energy shifted, quiet and sharp. The young filmmakers looked to her. Her smile stayed, but her eyes flickered with something else. Confusion? Concern? No, restraint. I'm sorry, Marcus. I don't follow, Sandra replied, still graceful. Still composed. Marcus smiled like a man who thought cruelty was charm. Oh, come now, he said, loud enough for the tables nearby to catch every word. Let's not pretend the industry hasn't evolved. Some of us know when it's time to bow out before the audience starts yawning. You could feel it, a slow gasp, unspoken, rippling through the room. Sandra's shoulders squared. She didn't blink. She didn't fold. But pain flickered behind her eyes. That's when Keanu stood. No dramatic announcement. No microphone grabbing. Just a quiet walk forward, steady, controlled, unapologetic, and something in the room held its breath, because legends don't always roar. Sometimes they just refuse to stay silent. The attack wasn't loud. It was surgical, precise, rehearsed, and masked in the silk glove of industry jargon. Marcus Langston had been waiting for the perfect moment. And now, under the soft chandeliers and quiet clinking of cocktail glasses, he struck. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Every word was engineered to strike where it hurt most. Not the heart, but the image. The thing Hollywood worships above all else, relevance. And he used it like a weapon. Sandra, Marcus said, voice smooth as glass but sharp beneath. Still charming the next generation, I see? Sandra turned, caught off guard. Around her, the young filmmakers she'd been laughing with stiffened. Conversations nearby dimmed like a volume knob had been quietly turned down. I'm sorry, she replied, polite but unsure. Marcus stepped closer, smile tight, voice just loud enough for others to overhear. I said it's admirable how you're still out here, making the rounds. I mean, at 54 you must know how the business works. There's a season for everything. Sandra blinked, uncertain whether she was hearing what she thought she was hearing. What are you implying, Marcus? His eyes gleamed. Not implying, being honest. Someone should be. He leaned in slightly. It's time to recognize that the spotlight moves on. Audiences want now, not nostalgia. You're not box office anymore. You're comfort food, warm, familiar, but nobody lines up for leftovers. It wasn't just cruel, it was precise. The way he said it, with that faux business tone, gave the illusion of professionalism. But it wasn't about market data. It was about domination, power, publicly dismantling someone who once stood taller than him. Because now he could. Sandra stood still, face composed, but the heat was rising. Not from shame, from fury. I don't understand why you'd feel the need to. Because someone has to say it. Marcus cut in louder this time. Everyone else is too polite to tell you, your time's up, you had a good run. But we've moved on, the words echoed. You're not selling seats anymore, Sandra. You're selling memories. Studios don't want sentimental, they want ROI. You're a risk. A ghost of the golden age trying to haunt the present. Every syllable was soaked in venom. You could feel the shift. The air turned stale. A few people looked away. Others, phones half raised, hesitated between recording and fleeing. The young filmmakers who had just been laughing moments ago were now avoiding eye contact. Sandra stood tall, but her hands trembled ever so slightly. She fought to control her breathing, her throat tightening. Not from his words, from the silence. The cowardly, complicit silence of a room full of people too afraid to step in. She could feel tears threatening behind her eyes. But she held them back. She would not give Marcus the victory of seeing her fall apart. Face it, he whispered now, leaning in just enough for nearby tables to still catch it. You're yesterday. And clinging to youth, relevance, charm, it's not graceful. It's desperate, Sandra swallowed hard. Her voice caught in her throat, halfway to a retort that might never come, and then a voice cut through the tension like a blade. That's a bold perspective, Marcus. The words weren't loud, but they landed like thunder. All heads turned. Keanu Reeves stepped forward from the shadows of the crowd. Slow and steady like a tide no one saw coming. The room held its breath. Conversations froze mid-sentence. Phones rose silently, instinctively. Marcus turned, that polished smirk already returning to his face. Keanu Reeves, he said, trying to keep his tone casual. Didn't see you hiding in the wings. Just giving Sandra a little truth. No harm. Done. Keanu didn't respond right away. He stopped just a few feet from Marcus, arms relaxed, expression unreadable, but his eyes. Those eyes burned. Truth, huh? Keanu said slowly, voice calm. That's what we're calling public humiliation these days. A ripple passed through the room. People shifted, leaned in. Marcus let out a short laugh, but it was hollow. Now, oh, come on, you know how this business works. It's tough, it's real. I'm not being cruel. I'm just being honest. No, Keanu replied, still calm. You're being small. The silence that followed was so deep, you could hear someone's wine glass being quietly set down across the room. See, there's a difference. Keanu continued. Between offering truth and swinging it like a club, what you did wasn't guidance, it wasn't even feedback. It was calculated disrespect, dressed up in a suit. Marcus stiffened. You don't know what you're talking about. This is how careers end gently with reminders. Keanu's jaw flexed. Careers don't end, they evolve. But men like you want to kill what you can't control. You want women like Sandra to vanish quietly so your ego can stay. Loud. Marcus tried to interject, but Keanu stepped forward just slightly, not threatening, but uncheckable. When someone I respect is being torn down just to make a point, that does concern me. And if no one else is going to say it, I will. You're not speaking for the industry, Marcus. You're speaking for your insecurity, and frankly, it's outdated. The room held still. Sandra watched, stunned, the tears now falling not from pain, but from something else entirely, vindication. Keanu turned to her now, gently. Sandra, you don't owe anyone an exit, least of all this guy. You've earned your place every step of the way, and if anyone here can't see that, that's their failure, not yours. Gasps, muffled applause, and a flicker of warmth spread through the room like light filtering into a cave. Marcus' mouth opened, but nothing came out. For the first time in a long time, he looked smaller, deflated, irrelevant. Listen here, Keanu, he sneered, his smile tightening into a sneer. You might have this absurd reputation as Hollywood's golden boy, the nice guy, the monk, the saint, but that doesn't give you the right to lecture me. I've built an empire in this town. I decide who rises and who doesn't. Keanu tilted his head slightly, that familiar expression flickering across his face, the kind of calm that audiences recognized just before everything unraveled on screen. But this wasn't a film. This was real. An empire? He echoed, his voice quiet, laced with something heavier than anger. Built on what, Marcus? On broken trust? On silenced talent? On the ruins of people you deemed inconvenient? The words landed like verdicts in a courtroom. The ballroom fell still. You could hear breath catch in throats. Tell me, Keanu pressed on, his voice low, surgical. How many dreams did you burn to fuel your ego? The crowd had stopped pretending to be discreet. Phones hung low at their sides, recording. No one was looking away now. You're talking about something you don't understand, Marcus snapped, though the edges of his confidence were beginning to splinter. This is a competitive business. Not everyone gets to stay relevant forever. Keanu stepped closer. Not aggressive, purposeful. His stillness was more unnerving than a raised voice. Competition isn't the same thing as cruelty. And what you did tonight wasn't business, it was sadism. Dressed up in industry jargon to make yourself feel important? Marcus glanced around, searching for allies. But where there were once nods and knowing smirks, he now found only frozen expressions, and people subtly distancing themselves. Sandra Bullock, Keanu said, turning slightly toward her, though his gaze never fully left Marcus, is one of the most respected, talented, and genuine professionals this industry has ever known, and you can't see that because you've forgotten what actual talent looks like. Marcus's jaw clenched. The room was slipping from his control, and he knew it. But he wasn't done yet. You're making a mistake, Reeves, he said, the threat curling in every syllable. I've got connections across this industry. Powerful ones. You don't understand what it costs to run things at my level. Sentiment doesn't pay box office. Loyalty doesn't close deals, and if you cross me, He leaned in, his voice low and cold. You single quotes LL find out just how fast even you can disappear. Keanu's response was a slow, deliberate smile. But it wasn't the charming one from red carpets or interviews. This smile was dangerous, the kind of smile that hinted at secrets, at consequences long overdue, and Marcus felt it. Something shifted in the room, not just the mood, but the power. The empire Marcus had built, brick by brick through fear and manipulation, began to crack at its foundation. Not because Keanu raised his voice, but because he didn't need to. He had truth on his side, and something far more threatening than wealth or influence. Respect. What Marcus didn't know was that Keanu had been collecting evidence, quietly, discreetly, for years, not out of malice, but out of duty. Stories whispered to him on quiet sets. Tears shared behind closed doors, contracts, messages, testimonies, all pieces of a puzzle that, when put together, exposed Marcus for what he really was, and Marcus had just handed him the final piece, for a moment that stretched into silence. Keanu just looked at him. His expression unreadable, but his eyes, those dark, soulful eyes, burned with the weight of decades. Of watching good people get broken, of staying silent. Until now. Not this time. Sandra watched, heart pounding. The tension between them was no longer just personal, it was symbolic. She could see it, the reckoning Marcus never believed could. Come was now standing in front of him, wearing a tailored black suit and a quiet smile. "Keanu," she whispered, touching his arm, her voice gentle but urgent. "You don't have to do this. I can handle him." He shook his head, slow and resolute. His gaze never wavered. "No," he said softly. "He's crossed too many lines. For too long." And Marcus finally sensed it. He wasn't the predator anymore. He was prey. The crowd, once passive observers, were now witnesses. The shift was irreversible. Cameras were rolling, eyes were watching. History was being written in real time. Desperate to reassert himself, Marcus tried one last move. "You know, Keanu," he said with a forced laugh, "I respect your little hero routine, I really do. But this isn't a movie. You don't get to save the day with a monologue. This is real life, and in real life, power wins." Keanu stepped closer, now only inches away. His voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried through the entire room. "Then let's talk about real power." Keanu's voice was low, calm, deliberate, yet it sliced through the room like a knife. Even waitstaff paused mid-step to listen. "You want to talk about hard truths, Marcus?" In that moment, Keanu was no longer just an actor defending a friend. Inside, he was making a choice that would shift the ground beneath them all, a choice he had avoided for years. He hadn't gone looking for dirt on Marcus Wellington. He didn't need to. Stories have found him, whispered by makeup artists in trailers, by assistants during rap parties, by young actors with haunted eyes and broken careers. He had watched, he had listened. He had remembered, but the hope that he'd never have to use what he knew, that hope had just died. He took another step forward. His presence, quiet but commanding, pulled the air tight with tension. "The truth is, Marcus, you built your empire by crushing people who couldn't defend themselves. You mistook fear for respect, cruelty for control." Marcus opened his mouth. But Keanu raised a hand, a simple motion. No drama, yet it silenced the man who had silenced so many. "You think having power makes you powerful. But you're wrong. Real power doesn't need to humiliate people to feel real." Then softer, almost solemn. "And the hardest truth of all?" He paused, letting the silence stretch until it screamed, "Your reign of fear ends tonight." The room went still. Something had shifted. People could feel it, a storm building under skin and silence. Marcus blinked, suddenly unsure. The man before him wasn't just an angry star. He was a threat. A mirror. A reckoning. "You have no idea what you're starting," Marcus snapped. But the edge of his voice was fraying. Keanu tilted his head slightly. The gesture was subtle but sharp, like the click of a lock before a door swings open. "Don't I?" he said quietly. "Then Jennifer Walsh, ring any bells?" The name hit the room like a dropped glass, sharp, unmistakable. Gasps followed, then stillness. Those who knew, really knew, felt a chill crawl up their spine. Marcus stiffened. His face drained of color. "I don't know what you're implying." Michael Chun, Sofia Rodriguez, David Kim, Amanda Foster. Each name hit like a gavel. A list of careers vanished. Dreams cut short. People who had vanished from sets and casting calls overnight. Keanu's voice never rose, but each word carried weight, not just as accusations, but as memories, all of them, Marcus. They didn't disappear, you buried them. Now, the silence around them turned into something else, realization. Recognition. Names people had heard in conversations that ended awkwardly. Scripts that had disappeared, deals that had fallen apart. Now the pattern was visible. And Marcus was standing in the center of it. Sandra stood frozen, her heart thudding. She had thought this confrontation was about her, but it was so much bigger. This was an unmasking. A reckoning. Marcus's voice cracked. "Did you keep records? Is this some kind of setup?" Keanu's eyes remained steady. "I didn't need records. I had ears. And I had memory. I listened when no one else would. I didn't forget when everyone else pretended not to notice. Around them, faces were changing, not just watching but processing. Something fundamental was breaking open. This wasn't just an uncomfortable moment anymore, this was history. Keanu took one last step forward. Now he stood close enough that Marcus could see everything, the years of observation, the disappointment, the accumulated moral weight in his eyes. "You're not a powerful executive, Marcus," he said softly. "You're a predator. You've weaponized fear and burned lives to keep control. But here's the thing about fear." He leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a whisper that still carried across the room. "It only works until someone stops running." Marcus turned, desperate for support, but found only faces turning away. The confidence that had always buoyed him, the certainty that people would defend him out of fear, was crumbling. And then, like a dam breaking, others stepped forward. Quiet at first, crew members, former assistants, young actors who had once fallen silent. Now they moved closer, some with tears in their eyes, others just nodding slowly. No more whispers. No more silence. They weren't just witnesses now. They were survivors. They were truth-tellers. And Marcus Wellington was standing alone at the center of the flood. The room didn't fall silent because Keanu shouted. It fell silent because he didn't need to. His voice was calm, steady, controlled. But there was something in it, something sharp enough to cut through the clinking of glasses, and whispered, "Conversations? You want to talk about hard truths?" He said, his eyes locked on Marcus Wellington, and just like that the air shifted. Keanu wasn't acting. He wasn't performing. He was choosing this moment deliberately, methodically, as the place where the truth would finally be spoken. For years he had watched Marcus, quietly, not digging for secrets, just paying attention. Listening when others dismissed the whispers. Catching the small cracks in the polished surface. Witnessing the damage. And now? Now the time for quiet observation was over. "The truth," Keanu said, "is that everything you've built your reputation, your influence, it all came at the cost of people who couldn't fight back." A few heads in the ballroom turned. Conversations froze in mid-sentence. The waitstaff paused mid-step. Something was happening. "You didn't lead people, Marcus," Keanu continued. "You broke them. You mistook their silence for weakness. You thought their fear meant respect." Marcus tried to speak, but Keanu raised a hand, just a simple motion. And yet it carried weight, authority. Marcus closed his mouth. "You don't command strength," Keanu said. "You project cruelty. Then call it leadership, and the world let you, until now." He let the silence stretch. "Every second more suffocating than the last. And the hardest truth," he said, voice now low but thunderous in its effect. "It's over," Marcus flinched. Not visibly, but enough that Keanu noticed. Enough that the mask started to crack. This wasn't just a call-out. It wasn't personal vengeance. It was something deeper. Something righteous. And for the first time in years, Marcus Wellington didn't look untouchable. He looked exposed. "This isn't about me," Keanu said. "It's not just about Sandra. This is about everyone you silenced. Everyone you pushed out, broke down, or cast aside like they were disposable." Marcus leaned forward, trying to reclaim his footing. "You don't have proof." Keanu stepped closer. "Jennifer Walsh," he said quietly. The name dropped like a bomb. Audible gasps followed. Someone at a nearby table choked on their drink. Everyone remembered Jennifer, the talented young actress who vanished from the spotlight without a trace. The rumors had circled. The studio had released a bland statement. But the truth? The truth had always lived in the silence. Marcus blinked rapidly. His smile flickered. "Michael Chung, Sophia Rodriguez, David Kim, Amanda Foster," Keanu said. Each name like a verdict. A chain of names that formed a pattern. A pattern that revealed something dark and deliberate. The ballroom froze. People were no longer pretending. No longer blind. Every name was a memory, a friend, a colleague. Someone who had suddenly gone quiet. Someone who had once been full of dreams. "You didn't just hurt people," Keanu said. "You erased them. You made them vanish. Because they didn't obey. Because they had limits you didn't like. Marcus straightened up. His face went pale. You're making baseless accusations. Keanu didn't flinch. You know I'm not. And Marcus did. Deep down, he did. Sandra stood nearby, eyes filled, with tears not of pain but of release. Keanu wasn't just protecting her. He was cutting the cord on an entire system of control. You kept a record? Marcus asked, voice shaky. I didn't need a file, Keanu replied. I kept something more dangerous. I remembered. I listened. I believed them when no one else would. That was the moment the room changed. It wasn't a party anymore. It was a reckoning, a turning point. A silent courtroom where every eye served as a witness. You've spent your career hiding behind power, Keanu said. But you never had power. You had fear. And fear only lasts until someone says no. More. Marcus scanned the crowd for backup. Familiar eyes, but no one stood. No one moved. They were done being silent. Done pretending he had ruled by fear. But now fear had shifted. Hollywood's changing, Keanu said, voice calm, even prophetic. The rules you built your kingdom on? They're falling apart? People aren't afraid anymore. Not of you. Marcus made one last desperate attempt. You're finished, Reeves. You're throwing your career away. But Keanu just smiled. It wasn't a cocky smile. It was the smile of a man with nothing to lose because he'd already won. I don't care about career threats, he said. I care about truth. And then, with a voice barely louder than a whisper, he delivered the final blow. You never had power, Marcus. You had silence, and silence ends tonight. That was it. The dam broke. Voices rose. People stepped forward, people who had been holding stories in for years. Actors, writers, assistants, people whose names never made headlines, but whose lives had been scorched by Marcus's reach. They weren't quiet anymore. And Marcus? He wasn't feared anymore. He was just a man, standing in the center of the room, drowning in the very silence he had once used as a weapon. His time was up.